Hey guys, and welcome back to another episode of Earthen's Den. And in this episode, we're going to be talking about a topic that's a little controversial. I think this topic is something that definitely creates a lot of tension. It's something that I think a lot of people tiptoe around. I think oftentimes when it comes to these conversations, it's one of those things where the language is important, tone is important, right? Like all of these things determine how people are going to receive this message because it's something that is so touchy, and yeah, so I'm gonna try to be mindful in that sense. But religion and relationships, this to me is so interesting, and I think it wasn't really until I started to study and practice certain things that I started to kind of realize the relationship between the two. And of course, the basis of religion is nothing more than just a practice, and it's a certain ideology. It's philosophical. It's, it's like a belief, right? And that's something that's very strong. It's something that's very powerful. And so what I found, just like with religion and relationships, first of all, when it comes to religion, it's something that it's something that can be used to control people, and in many ways it's something that can be put in place, for fear tactics, and that right there is not necessarily liberation. I think when we talk about our spiritual beings and, coming into a different playing field, that's something that, I don't really know if the two can coexist, if I'm being honest. And I think when it comes to relationships, I'm going to speak on the basis of Christianity because that's something that I did study. And first and foremost, Christians, there are some people who will beat you over the head with the Bible. Like they are Christian Bible thumpers, and it is insane. And what I found with certain people like this, Christianity can really bore people who are, has really bored people who are very judgmental, people who are cynical in many different ways. They're not really open-minded, and I guess it's just the premise of like Christianity. And most and foremost, it's one of those things where it's like you don't really have a relationship with God, and people think that because they study the Bible from front to back and they know every scripture, every story in the Bible that makes them, have a relationship with God. When I first started my walk, I started out in a spiritual sense. For me, it was completely different. Like I didn't read a Bible until I was like really at an age where I could understand it for myself. I would hear all of those things, and honestly, I was reluctant to pick up a Bible because the things that I would hear, a lot of Christians say, if you do X, Y, and Z before, X, Y, and Z, or, appointed time, then you're sinful and God doesn't love you. And what I found when I started to actually read the Bible was very interesting, because it seems as though when it comes to just the Christian religion and a lot of pastors, and that's why I say just be mindful of people that you listen to and people who minister to you, because what I found is that people pick and choose what scriptures they want to apply, and I can't stand it. And so for me, I was always kind of the type of person to where when it comes to my faith, I talk about it, but it's just one of those things where I just think when it comes to other people and like what you believe is what you believe, you know what I mean? And that's just your thing, you know what I mean? I'm not really one to feel like I need to beat it over anybody's head. Now I've seen kind of all sides of this. I've seen Christians who were, impoverished. And when I say impoverished, I mean, I'm not even talking just in the physical, tangible sense, but like emotionally and spiritually. And they were really wrecked, And then I've seen people who talk about God in such a way, and they're joyous and they're happy, and they really do have this everlasting joy and this peace, right? And then I see people who practice spirituality, right? And they don't really believe in like religion or any of those things. And I notice that these people are very fearless, And so it's one of those things to where it's like, man, you have to really just do what's true for you. But back to what I was saying in regards to my walk, it was one of those things where it was like, I didn't read a Bible because of everything I was hearing. My dad was definitely somebody who was like, oh, you can't trust the Bible. I think that's a story that's pretty prevalent in the Black community, and I was reading like James Baldwin and just, so it was something that I was honestly reluctant to do, but it was interesting because I had like a Bible scripture. I got that tatted on me when I was like 18, and I was like, why did I do that? Like, I'd never even read a Bible, but it was Corinthians 16:14, and it was, let all that you do be done in love. That was something I had resonated with very heavily, like, because I was always kind of like that person. I've always been a person who was really in tune with my light, whether or not I could articulate it, whether or not I could, I wasn't always willing to accept it or acknowledge it, but it's always been there. And that's something I think I've always known, just, based on my entire indifference and, my upbringing, always being alone. I've always kind of been in that space to sit with it. And so I think my truth was something that was always just very dear or near to me, and so I started out just with meditation, and I was doing like the talk ticks and like, a lot of like spiritual readings in regards to just like ascension, and that was my spiritual teaching. And so obviously I had this tattoo, and so I just kind of wanted to go to certain scriptures, and I started to listen to certain pastors that I have found, and I was like, man, like some of these messages are really touching. And I started to kind of study it in Christianity in such a way, and then I started to meet other Christians, and it was completely different. It was almost like the relationship that they had and the relationship that I had, it was just not the same. Like, it was like one of those things where they were just more so about the teachings of Christianity rather than the actual experience. And so I say that to say, I think that God is truly an experience, and I'm never one to force people to do anything. I think for me, when it comes to like what I believe in my faith, I think that's something that you need to discover for yourself, and I definitely would encourage people to say, hey, if you haven't tried it, if you haven't experienced it, don't knock it. You know what I mean? And so that was kind of just how I had found God, in my own sense of self, in my own truth, in my own relationship with God in itself, And I think overall, when people say higher power, source, whatever you want to call it, right? It's all the same. So that's like first things first, like that's all the same. And, what I found in the Bible, to me, I believe is just nothing more than wisdom. You have to be discerning with anything that you read, anything that's on this earth that's man-made. Okay, you need to be discerning. That doesn't matter like what it is. You need to make the decision for yourself, So don't listen to people when they have certain experiences that you haven't experienced, or certain, commentaries around certain things that you haven't experienced. Like, find out for yourself. I was that person. Like, I'm just somebody who's just very courageous, And so that's what I found. I found that it was something that was definitely, it was a lot of wisdom in there. And then, prayer, that makes a difference, and just, the whole nine. And so I just wanted to just kind of talk about that on the first premise of this video, because it's one of those things where it's like, you hear so much about it. And I just think that if you haven't experienced it, if you haven't read it, then don't conform to what other people's ideas are around it unless you've experienced it for yourself, and that's with anything, And when it comes to relationships, I think that Christianity and just religion in itself manipulates us to think that there are perfect people. So there are some Christians who, talk about certain things, and it's like no human being is perfect, and it's almost like a us against them, right? The people who have what we consider we've done wrong in the world, right? And I love this book by Paul Fernini, and he talks about it's love without conditions, and he talks about we don't really have the power to say whether or not somebody has done something that's good or bad, right? And I was listening to Maya Angelou today, which is so ironic, and she talked about how when it comes to human beings, we are not in alienation of anything. And, to just kind of clarify that, it just pretty much means like, everything that a human does is something that we can do within ourselves. You know what I mean? So whether that is something that is destructive or constructive, it's within all of us, you know what I mean? And so that was something that was very touching to me. And, so I think that when it comes to religion, it makes you believe that there's a perfect person, that there's going to be this perfect partner that's going to come to you, and they're not going to be any there's not going to be any flaws. There's not going to be any bad habits. There's not going to be any anger or, just anything wrong with this person to that extent. And I think that's one of the things that really hinders relationships, most importantly, because you have that. And I've also seen with some women, some Christian women who kind of enter into relationships with their partners, and they're like beating their partners over the head about, their walk with God. And, they are telling people that, you're going to go to hell if you do this, or you're going to, and to me, that's horrible. Like, that's so horrible. God is so loving. Like, God is nothing more than light. And it's funny because this is why I say you need to figure things out for yourself. It cracks me up. It's like people really pick and choose what scriptures they want to apply and what teachings they want to teach about. Now I think you have some pastors who have some good intentions, but overall, man, I don't think that there's no perfect way. I don't think that there's a perfect way. I think that we can only do the best that we can, and we're loved in that space. You know what I mean? And we make mistakes, and life is hard. Like, life literally is hard, and there's no manual to life, and it's continuous, and it springs you forward, and then it like pulls you 50 steps back sometimes, and it's scary. And sometimes we're alone, and sometimes it's, we're afraid, and we are amongst, different spirits, and we don't have understanding. And so, to really, summarize that, it's just like, there's no perfect way to do anything. I think at the end of the day, we're doing the best that we can do with what we know. And that's all we can do. And all we can ever do is continue to grow and evolve as human beings, and most importantly, as spirits. I long for ascension. That's what I want. You know what I mean? And so I just think that it's just so important to just kind of be in that space. But yeah, man, I see Christian women, and they're like, oh, you're going to go to hell if you do this, or, oh, you're going to, and it's crazy. And I think that it also teaches people that, if you don't believe in, God or whatever, that you're unethical, that you're cruel, and it's nothing more than a divide. And so you have to just be mindful. And, at the end of the day, man, it's just one of those things where it's like, you just got to stay true to yourself. And when I mean true to yourself, it's like, do what works for you. And I've never really been one that's been big on titles, like, and it's never, me denying my faith or anything like that. But I just think what's so saddening is like when we talk about God, it's always in that construct of like confinement, and it's so limiting. And I just think that God is a God, like God is truly liberating. Like, it really is. And it's an amazing experience to even have known and discovered God. And it's something that's within all of us. That's the thing. Like, that's what I talk about, read it for yourself, figure things out for yourself, like, and just have those overall relationships with yourself, because I think that religion can really be destructive if it's not taught, or more so just like God in itself is not experienced beforehand. And that's all I'm saying, because, spirits of like fear and anger and, judgment and all of those things, that doesn't feel good. And anything from God is good, and it feels great. And it's definitely a light, and it's amazing. And so, yeah, man. So that's something that I've noticed. And then, another thing when it comes to like relationships and religion, God's not putting everybody together. I think that a lot of people think because they throw God on something that it's like, oh, this is like destined. And I know some people who are married and they are so miserable. The marriage is not fruitful. The marriage is not liberating in any way. There's no ascension. There's no liberation. Just two people who are very miserable, but together they are held together by the name of God. And that is not true. I just don't think that that's something that's true. I don't think that that's something that's honest, So I just think that's just something that's just so important. And, in the end, when it comes to picking a partner, man, it makes a difference. I definitely think it makes a difference. Like, I think picking a partner, especially a lifetime partner, is probably one of the greatest decisions, if not the hugest decisions that you can make in your entire life, because I think that the people around you, this just goes back to just social influence, right? It just determines everything, So, if you're with somebody who doesn't have a willingness to grow or evolve, and, I think the thing too about life is that it really forces you to grow up. It forces you to grow up. It forces you to grow, and if you don't, then you'll just die. It's like, it's either grow or die, right? I don't think that there's you don't really have a choice. It's either one or the other. But there are some people who, you can get with, who will really like derail you to a point where you're like, wake up, you're like 65 and you're like, oh man, I got to start this all over. And, now I can start my walk with God, and, just me figuring out who I am and my purpose and, all of those things. And so you want to be mindful of that. I think that there are definitely different spirits, and people on the earth that, are sent kind of like with a different agenda, so you kind of want to be mindful of that. But I think most importantly, solitude is everything. Like being in a space where you're just solid and like you're just grounded and rooted in who you are. I think that's everything. You know what I mean? There's no greater feeling, honestly, than being your own friend. I had got to a point in my life where I was just so comfortable being alone. I was like, I'm kind of just going to ride this thing out, and I'm just going to, do what I love and, walk in my purpose and inspire people. And I was cool with that, so that was kind of like the space that I was in. But it's amazing how life works. But I'm saying, like, you want to be so secure within yourself to that extent. I think that people could come into your life and seriously enhance it, and it's something beautiful, and it's nice to be able to have connections with people and to share things with people. I think that's probably one of the greatest things. I don't think that it's all for us, but at the same time, I think that you need to be rooted in who you are. I think that you need to know who you are to a certain extent, right? Because we're always growing and we're forever changing, and I think that just seasons of solitude is so important. I think it's just so important. And so, if you've never really been in a space where you've just kind of been alone and, you're kind of like jugging on your own, like you're kind of like in that space where you're just like, you're moving on your own time and you're doing things for you and you're taking care of yourself, and you're loving yourself, the good, the bad, and the ugly, I think that was like the whole forefront of seasons, man. It was like the good, the bad, and the ugly, and so I just feel like if you've never been in that season, then that's something I would recommend, just because it just gives you a greater sense of clarity of just who you are as a person and your energy and your spirit, and just, those are the times I think, when you're alone, that you can really develop a relationship with God, and so I think another thing too is feeling. I think emotions, we talk about them in a negative sense, but I think that your emotions can really help guide you in certain ways. And we talk about emotions, and in this podcast episode, when I'm talking about emotion, it's more so like your intuition and what you're feeling internally. It's like your spirit, your spirit's like guiding you through those feelings, right? And so I think that that's definitely something that's important. So yeah, for me, it's like, if it doesn't feel right, I won't deal with it. I don't really, nah, man, it's like life is so short, and, I know we're going to have detours and things are going to come up, but how we handle it is everything. But I'm not going to, I guess in a sense, I think it comes with maturity. I'm not going to put myself in situations where I'm like, man, I know this doesn't feel good, and I just stay. You know what I mean? Because nobody got time for that, right? Like, so just do what feels good to you, and if you read something or you see something and it disrupts your spirit, then trust that, or if you see something or you read something or you hear something and it moves your spirit in a positive light and in a positive way, trust that, and I say all the time, like, once you learn to trust yourself, what other people have to say and what other people do, it doesn't really matter, because you trust you. You know what I mean? And they say in a world full of sharks, who can you trust? And it's like yourself. You can trust yourself, and so, and like I said, that's not projection. This is not that. This is like a completely different conversation. So with every message that I say, be discerning, because like I said, I'm not going to spell it out. Like, I want people to be able to think for themselves. So I think that that's definitely a few of the ways that religion and relationships coexist, or not really coexist in any way. I think the two can kind of hinder one another depending on the person and the experience and and so God is definitely an experience, and I think when it comes to the teachings of God, is law, is universal, and you got to figure that out for yourself. I think that's pretty much what I'm going to leave you guys with. And I hope everybody has a great day, and I'm going to leave you with your thoughts.